Hello, Julie here and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm doing a layout from a sketch. Now the sketch is by Allison Davis and I'm going to link below a video that shows how she adapts her sketches. So this is Allison's sketch and this is the layout that I created using that sketch. The first thing I'm going to do is create the Christmas tree. You can see that I have rotated the sketch once, so 90 degrees, and my stripes that are now going to be running down the left hand edge of the photos is going to be turned into a Christmas tree instead of pennants. Now to make that Christmas tree I'm going to cut an assortment of strips of paper in various colours and widths. I'm using the Colour Blast Arty Farty paper range here, and I've cut a triangle of white paper, that's just printer paper, just so I can get an idea of how to assemble my tree. I'm cutting my papers to length so that they get smaller as they go up to the top, and at this stage I'm just trying to work out what colours to put where. So I'm cutting as I said, an assortment of strips in an assortment of widths and colours. Now I'm going to use that triangle that I cut out of the white paper and layer my strips in a fashion that I like so that the colours sit how I want them to sit. I'm going to cut my papers as I go so that I've got a bit of an idea about what length they need to be. Now that I'm happy with how my tree is looking and the position of the different colours, I'm going to cut a fishtail into the end of each one of my strips. I am not being fussy about this, I'm just cutting it, marking how wide it needs to be, and then cutting a fishtail in the other end. Each strip of paper as it goes up gets slightly shorter. Once I had all my strips trimmed and fishtailed, I took it to my sewing machine, all of them to my sewing machine, and stitched down the middle of each one. Some I stitched with straight stitch and some I stitched with a zigzag stitch. I then just wrapped the ends around to the back of the fishtail and secured them in place with sellotape, and then used my ink pad to ink the edges of each one of those strips. While I was making my strips, I also made a few extra because I wanted to put some different layers on my Christmas tree, so I wanted some of the pattern papers to be risen up off of the Christmas tree. You'll see probably as we go along what I mean by that. So to make sure that I got my original strips back in the right place, I numbered each one before I took them out of place, and now I'm just going to use my glue and stick them back onto that white paper triangle. So now I'm going to add those top layers. As I said earlier on, I've put foam behind each one of those strips and I'm just going to position them randomly on my Christmas tree. By doing this I get that nice texture to the Christmas tree and it's not so one-dimensional. So with the stitching, the fishtail edges and the foam layer, I think the Christmas tree has got lots and lots of dimension to it. Allison does a series on her YouTube channel where she takes a sketch and then does 5 or 6 other layouts, adapting that sketch in various ways. I just love watching her videos, and I would highly recommend, if you've got a few moments spare, pop over and check them out. As I said, I'll put a link to her YouTube channel in the description box below. Okay, now that my Christmas tree is finished, I'm going to start on the basics of my layout. First of all, I'm using this cardstock in a colour called Mediterranean, and I'm cutting a square that's 9.5 inches by 9.5 inches. I did say earlier that I was using the Colour Blast Arty Farty paper. That was only for the Christmas tree. Excuse me. The actual paper that I'm using on my layout is basic grey paper from the Serenade paper range. So I'm cutting a 9.5 inch square here. The photos I'm using are of my Christmas tree this year, close-ups of the decorations that were on it, and I have trimmed them down so that in total they are 4 inches by 9 inches, and I've filed around the edge of each photo so that they are defined. I'm going to use double-sided tape to attach my photos to my 9.5 inch square that I've just cut. I'm looking around now to find a scrap of the Arty Farty paper to use as the base of my Christmas tree. When I find a piece that I'm happy with, I use my scissors and just trim it down so it's angled a bit on the sides, a bit narrow at the bottom than at the top. I've cut a piece of sticky backed foam, craft foam, a bit smaller than my Christmas tree, and I'm going to attach that to the back of my Christmas tree because I want that to be risen up off of the background. I used my Aleen's original tacky glue to attach both the tree and the base of the tree to the layout. I hadn't stitched around the base of the tree, so I just used my black pen to draw in some faux stitching. Time now to make the star for the top of my tree. I'm using my Nellie's multi-frame star die, and I've cut 4 sizes, the 4 smallest sizes, out of the scraps of the paper that I made the tree out of. I'm inking around the edge of each of those, and I'm going to layer them on top of each other with foam tape between each one. Once I've got my star assembled, I'm going to attach it to my layout. Now I'm going to put my next pattern paper on my layout, so I'm working from the top down. This paper is called Parlor, and I'm cutting this to 10.5 inches square. This is going to sit behind the green layer that we've just done. I inked the edges of the pattern paper I've just cut, and I also inked the edges of the green cardstock that's got our Christmas tree on it, and then I used double-sided tape to attach that to the green layer to the orange layer. I have put a bit of sticky tape behind the Christmas tree on the back of the green because it was a bit rumpled and I wanted it to sit down nice and flat. Now I'm going to use another sheet of the Mediterranean, and I'm going to cut that so that it's 10 3/4 inches square because I want to have just a nice little fine definition between the orange paper and the background of the layout. Well, I've got my trimmer there. I trimmed the background. This is another one of those basic grey Serenade papers. This one's called Dowager. So I just trimmed the branding strip off of that, and that's going to be the back layer of my layout. Now I'm going to go ahead and assemble the rest of my layout. I inked the edges of all of the papers. I inked the edges of all of my papers on all of my layouts, in point of actual fact. In hindsight, I could have gutted these papers and just had frames, but I never thought of it at the time, so there's all full sheets, and I've used a combination of glue and double-sided tape to attach these papers together to make my layout. Now that my layout's all together, I took it back to my sewing machine and stitched around the edge of the 3 layers. The title for this layout is 2020. I'm using my Dynamics High Rise Numbers die to cut that. I think it's fairly evident what the layout is about, so all I'm putting on there is the year. I'm going to ink around the edge of each of those numbers, and then I'm going to attach them to the right hand corner of the bottom photo. I'm going to use my same star die, Nellie's multi-frame stars, and I've cut 9, I think, of the smallest and 9 of the second smallest star, and I'm going to ink around the edges of those and then attach the smaller one on top of the larger one with a little foam square behind it. I'm going to position these across the top of my layout in sort of 2 loops, and then I'm going to attach them using some glue. These have got the dimension behind them, so they do stand up off the page as well. To add a little bit more interest to the page, a bit of gloss, a bit of shine, sparkle, I add glossy accents to each of the small stars, including the one on the Christmas tree, and also to the title, the 2020 down the bottom. And that completes my layout for today. There are some close-ups at the end of the video, so stay tuned for those. I hope you've enjoyed watching the video, and if you get the chance, pop over and check out Allison's YouTube channel. She does a fantastic job, I think. Okay, if you're not already a subscriber, I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel, and if you click the bell and then all, you'll be notified each time I upload a new video. I'd love to see you back here again. Well, thank you for being here with me today, and I hope you come and join me for my next video.